For the last 10 years, this has been my cell phone. Well, technically, these have been my cell phones. I had this flip phone for the first 5 years until the microphone broke. I've had this flip phone for the last 5 years. That is, until this past month, when I bought myself this, a smartphone, and re-entered the modern era. Today I want to talk a little bit about my journey having a flip phone for these last 10 years, what I learned from having a flip phone, and why I ultimately decided to get a smartphone again. My name is Cyrus Aurelius, welcome back to my channel, and let's jump right into it. 10 years ago, I was starting out university, and I found that I was completely addicted to my smartphone. I'd be in lectures, and I'd be looking at my phone or playing games on my phone and just not paying any attention at all. I'd be having conversations with people, and I'd be finding that I'd want to pick up my phone, or sometimes I would pick up my phone, and I would not be paying attention to them during the conversations. And one of the worst things for me is I would be busing back and forth to campus, and it would take me about an hour each way. So I'd be on the bus for about 2 hours, and I would always tell myself, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing a reading or that I'm working on a project while on the bus. And ultimately, I would end up looking at my phone and mindlessly scrolling, and I'd look up, and an hour had passed. And I just completely wasted that hour on the bus and not done absolutely anything with my time. And I was just finding myself falling into this loop over and over again. And it was just really, really frustrating. And I kind of felt like there was no way out. Every time that I tried to break that pattern, to break that loop, I just found that I didn't have enough willpower, and I would constantly pull back into social media or to these random addicting phone games. And I just had so much trouble trying to break that pattern for myself. Until one day, one of our professors in university was sitting down and talking with us in class, and she was telling us about how she's seeing how we're all addicted to our cell phones all the time. We're always on them all the time. I took communications in university, and so this was a communication class, and the instructor was talking about how technology is just consistently and has been consistently hurting people's communication between each other, and just not really being able to find that way to communicate. And she was just kind of giving all these examples, and specifically how cell phones in particular, especially for our generation, had damaged our ways of communicating in so many different ways, especially communicating in person. And then she pulled out a flip phone, and she said, "This is my phone. I've had this phone for years. If somebody really needs to get in contact with me, they can call me or they can text me. And if it's not that important for them to call or text, then it can wait until I get to my computer and I'll deal with it then." And I don't know what it was, but something just clicked in my brain when she said that. I don't know why I'd never considered getting a flip phone before, but it just seemed like an impossible thing, like something that wasn't even an option. But as soon as she said that and she showed us her flip phone, as soon as that it was right in my face, it just clicked. In that same weekend, I went to the mall, bought a flip phone, downgraded my cell phone plan to a plan that only included unlimited talk and text, and put my smartphone in the drawer and didn't look back for a long time. At first, it was really weird. Not having a smartphone, not having that constant connection to the internet, and effectively going cold turkey like that was really, really odd. I suddenly had these long stretches of times where I had nothing to distract myself, especially when I was on the bus. Like I said, 2 hours a day I would spend on the bus, and all of a sudden, I didn't have constant access to the internet. And so I felt a lot of discomfort. I felt a lot like I was missing something in that first month where I was trying to make that transition. It was really odd to not have, all of a sudden to not have any connection to the internet. And for that first month, I was not 100% sure that I made the right choice. But after that first month, as that first month happened, I started to realize a lot of the things that were frustrating me with my smartphone were no longer a problem anymore. I was reading a lot on the bus. Almost every time I was on the bus, I was reading. So I'd spend a couple hours a day at least reading. When I was having conversations with people, I was fully present in those conversations because there was nothing in my pocket kind of trying to distract me or pull my attention or focus my attention. When I was in classes and in lectures, I was constantly paying attention. I was taking notes. I was not, again, being distracted super easily. And so a lot of those frustrations that I had with the smartphone were no longer present. And I really, really liked that. But I did start to notice that I was still missing something on having a smartphone. Primarily the main thing that I noticed that I was sad about missing was access to music. I didn't have any access to music on my flip phones. And so around month 2 of having the flip phone, I decided to pull out the old smartphone and downloaded Spotify and downloaded a whole bunch of my Spotify playlists onto the phone, and effectively made my old smartphone kind of like a glorified iPad or iPod. And just basically a way to have that music and be able to listen to things while not having all the distraction because of the constant connection to the internet. So it was almost a bit of like the best of both world situations with that. As the years progressed, I started to notice a lot of different changes and things happening to me. One of the first things I noticed is that my reliance to my phone diminished to almost nothing. There'd be countless times where I would just leave the house and completely forget to bring my phone with me, and it would just not faze me at all. I'd say, yeah, I'd get it when I get home, and that'd be that. And I noticed that a lot of my peers would almost panic or feel really scared when they didn't have their phone on them, when they'd forgotten it at home. They would not know what to do with themselves, and I definitely did not have that, which I really liked about myself for sure. I also noticed that my sense of direction was just getting better and better. Because I didn't have the GPS and I would constantly have to figure out how to get around myself, I'd either have to look up directions beforehand, I'd have to remember street names, and I was finding that if I'd been to a place once, I could almost always get there again afterwards, and I was really liking that I was developing this skill. And if there's ever times where I was going on longer road trips, I would just print out the directions and follow the directions from the printed out version. And there was one time that I was going to meet these friends at this cottage up north, and they were utterly convinced that they're going to call for me in the middle of the night saying, hey, I'm lost, please come find me. I couldn't follow the directions. And I remember I was driving down to this cottage, and the directions told me to keep going straight down this road, and these backcountry roads were mislabeled. And so I kept going straight down this road, and sometime later I came down to this dead end. And before retracing my steps and figuring things out, I got out of the car, and I was just looking at this big, wide open field. And I just sat on the hood of my car and watched 24 deer in this wide open field just graze for about half an hour as the sun set. And to this day, that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever gotten to see with my own eyes in real life. And I would have never had the opportunity to do that if I hadn't gotten lost, because I had these printed out directions. And if you're wondering, I did make it to that cottage. I had to retrace my steps and figure out what was wrong with these road signs. But I'm really grateful for the fact that I did get a little bit lost in that situation. I was able to kind of happen upon this wide open field in the middle of nowhere. I could also feel that my attention span was getting better and better. I could read for longer periods of time without feeling like I was getting bored. I could have conversations with people and not feel distracted in any way, especially when I was in lectures, all these things. I could do all these things and not feel bored or like I needed some kind of distraction. And so I felt like there was a whole bunch of positives to having this flip phone. But there were also negatives to having a flip phone as well. I missed out on certain opportunities because I wasn't able to see my email in time. And so by the time I got to the email, the opportunity had passed and I wasn't able to get certain opportunities because of that. Despite feeling like my sense of direction was growing, on the odd occasion that I would get kind of turned around because of a road closure or something like that, and I got pushed into this area that I didn't know, I'd get entirely lost and have to kind of figure out how to get back to a street that I knew and that I could kind of navigate around again. And sometimes that would take, 10 minutes of a detour, but a couple times I was kind of driving around lost for over an hour. And so there are different things like that where having had a GPS would have been really valuable in those situations, being able to just figure out, okay, there's a detour, the road is closed, no problem. We'll find a 5-minute detour and get around, and not just driving around mindlessly until you find a street that you recognize and you can kind of figure out how to go from there. And honestly, one of the largest problems, at least in my opinion, is that the world basically expects everybody now to have a smartphone. It's just an expectation. If you're doing almost anything, there's some kind of requirement for a smartphone almost. If you're buying a ticket for almost anything, whether it's a movie, a play, a concert, a lot of those tickets are almost digital only. Or you can print it, but it's a pain in the butt to try and figure out how to print it and get the file to a printer to print it. If you're paying for parking, if you're trying to go anywhere to pay for parking, often now you have to pay for parking with an app. Even if you're going to a restaurant, a lot of restaurants now, in order to get the menu for the restaurant, you need to scan a QR code and bring it up on your phone. And I have a lot of really strong opinions about that. I think that we should not be assuming that everyone has the capabilities to own a smartphone or the desire to own a smartphone. But the fact is that is just what the world is like right now. That's the expectation. And I would be constantly finding myself in these situations where I would basically have to be relying on somebody else in order to show me the menu for the restaurant we're at, or pay for parking, or all these different things. And I really don't like having to rely on people in that way. And on the odd occasion when I was on my own, and I'd find myself in these situations, I have to figure out some kind of alternative, and it would just really be inconvenient to try and do that. So it was just becoming more and more difficult to kind of continue in this way, not having a smartphone. And then the odd times in the past couple of years, I've been using my old smartphone that doesn't have any data to try and circumvent this in some ways, but then I'd be in situations where I'd be trying to find some kind of Wi-Fi connection in order to pay for the parking or to get the dinner menu. And so it just is becoming more and more, or was becoming more and more inconvenient and frustrating to try and figure these things out. And that also required me to be bringing around two different phones. I'd have my flip phone that would be able to text and call, and then I'd have this other iPod smartphone that I'd be able to utilize for the internet on the odd occasion where I would need it. And so I was carrying around two phones. For the majority of the time, that didn't bother me, but sometimes it became frustrating to have to carry on both phones. And I don't know whether or not it's the frustration about carrying two phones or just the frustration of the way the world works right now. Maybe it's a combination of both, but I think all those things were slowly ticking away at me in terms of pushing me towards eventually switching back to a smartphone. Over the past 10 years having the flip phone, I felt like it became part of my personality, part of who I was. I was the person with a flip phone, and I became known that way to a lot of my friends. And I think the fact that I kind of assigned this to being a part of my personality kind of made me really hesitant or reluctant in terms of making that switch. I think that I had a lot of reluctance and I was very headstrong because of that. And I think that probably delayed me making the switch to a smartphone for probably about maybe a full year before kind of finally taking the leap. And so eventually, like I showed you at the beginning of the video, I got a smartphone. I got the Google Pixel 8a, which is still a bit of an older smartphone, all things considered. And I got the smallest plan that I could find, phone plan I could find. So I got 5 gigabytes of data with it. So basically gives me an opportunity to jump on and get a GPS if I need to, or the ability to hop online for something small if I need to, when I need to. But I have found, and I was kind of telling myself when I was making this decision, that I would still be able to incorporate all of the skills and the habits that I learned from having a flip phone for the past 10 years. So like I said, although I can hop online for little things when I need to, I've been able to just leave my phone aside and not feel that attachment to it in the same way like I didn't feel that with my flip phone. I've been able to have conversations with people, go out to dinner, and not feel the need to be constantly grabbing up my phone in different ways. I don't have the data on at all times. I only turn it on when I absolutely need to turn it on, and otherwise when I'm out, I'm out. And I just haven't found myself doom scrolling and just constantly being on my phone in these different ways. Don't get me wrong, it's happened once or twice, it happens here and there, but all in all, I've kind of been able to find this good middle ground between the two where I'm taking all those skills that I learned from having a flip phone and applying it to having a smartphone, with the added benefit that I have that ability to be online when I need to be. So it's been kind of a really nice opportunity to have a bit of the best of both worlds in that way. Overall, I'm really happy that I had 10 years with a flip phone in this modern time. It taught me so many great lessons, and without having that time with the flip phone, I don't really know how I would be right now with a smartphone. I was already on a path of being really addicted to them, and so I think that would have just continued on. I think my university experience would have been way different having that addiction and that convenience right at my fingertips. And so I learned so much from having a flip phone. But that being said, I'm happy to be back on a smartphone again right now. It's nice to have that convenience. It's nice to not have to rely on people in different ways and to be able to do these things myself. But it's also really nice to know that if I ever wanted to, I'm not reliant on the smartphone technology, and I could leave the smartphone at home, print out some directions, and go on an adventure. I just hope the parking meter takes change when I get there. So, what are your thoughts about all this? Are you like me and you're frustrated with the way that the world expects you to have this mini computer in your pocket at all times? Or are you super happy with your smartphone companion? I want to have a conversation about it in the comments below. And until next time.